Hey, what's up everyone? Miguel Quiles here, and in this video, I'm gonna tackle a question that I get all the time. Pretty much anytime I upload a photo to social media, people want to know, how did I retouch my photos? And what I started to realize is that I don't think that people understand that there's a lot more to these images than what you're seeing, and there's a lot more to it than just simple retouching. So in this video, I want to share with you 5 things that you need to know when you're photographing skin and you want to get great skin quality. So let's go ahead and get started. The first tip that I want you to be aware of is that if you're trying to get good skin texture, you have to make sure that the makeup has been applied correctly. Now, obviously, we're talking about when you're photographing women, and if you have the ability to work with a makeup artist, that is going to make your life so much easier, because if they are applying makeup correctly, you're gonna get, and if they're doing it with the right products, you're gonna end up getting this really good, beautiful quality to the skin before you even actually get to retouching. So if the makeup had not been applied correctly, then that's gonna cause you some issues in post as well. So we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit, but it is crucially important that for close-up beauty work or for portraits, that the makeup has been applied properly. Now, if you're working with a male model or a male subject, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but because there are male models that I've worked with that have had makeup applied to them. But generally speaking, male models and subjects don't have makeup put on them. And so in that type of situation, what's really important is to make sure that the skin is moisturized, that, and I'm notorious for this as well, where I haven't shaved in a few days, so you just get these random sprouts of hair that pop up. You want to make sure that those are taken care of. Granted, it is relatively quick and easy to fix those things in post, but if you could catch it ahead of time, that would be great. Skin that hasn't been moisturized is really, really tricky to work with, and so that's where makeup really helps. The application and the actual type of makeup they use is also really important. If they use makeup that is very cakey on their face, it's really, really hard to fix that in post. So before you even get to post-processing, the makeup has to be done right. And if it is, you're gonna have a much better time, and it's gonna be just a better overall photo once it's all said and done. Tip number 2 is to make sure that you select the right modifier. Now, you might be saying, Miguel, what is the right modifier? Which one do I choose? And so here's kind of a generalized tip that I want to give you guys in terms of which modifiers to choose. If you're working with somebody and you're really trying to, let's say, enhance their skin texture, maybe they have really good skin, the makeup has been applied properly and it looks great. In that type of situation, using something like a hard light shaper, like a beauty dish or a silver reflective umbrella, is gonna bring out the texture even more because it creates more contrast in the skin. Now, that's a great thing if they have good skin, because it's gonna make their skin look even better. It's gonna have more of a, kind of like an HD quality to the image. So having a hard light modifier enhances the look of the skin. However, if the person does not have good skin, let's say their skin has not been moisturized, maybe they have scars or, you know, life that's happened to their face, then what ends up happening is if you use a hard light shaper like a beauty dish or an umbrella, it's gonna be very contrasty. And so if they have a pimple and you light them with this hard light shaper, it's gonna cause this like shadow to happen on their face, and it's very difficult to retouch that and make it look natural. So you want to make sure that if you're using a hard light shaper, that they have good skin to begin with. You can diffuse some of these things like a beauty dish or an umbrella. If you put a diffusion cloth on that, that tends to soften it a little bit. It's a little more forgiving. However, if they, let's say, don't have great skin, then I would tell you, using a light shaper like a 5-foot Octa or a large softbox, this is going to create less contrast and less shadows on the face. So when you do this, you're gonna get just better overall skin quality. You're not gonna have so much sharpness and you're not gonna have so much texture, but that's a good thing, right? Because if you get all of that and it's not a good quality to begin with, we're gonna run into some issues. So this is a really big thing that I think goes unnoticed by a lot of people. you have to make sure that you're choosing the right light shaper. And if you guys are interested, I'll talk about these at length in a future video. If you are, make sure you let me know in the comments section below if that's some information that you'd be interested in seeing, like what's the difference between an umbrella and a beauty dish, or a beauty dish and an octa, so on and so forth. I'd be happy to do a video on that. Just let me know in the comments section below. But that is tip number 2. Make sure that you're choosing the right light shapers based on the subject that you're working with. Tip number 3, make sure that you choose the right lens based on the subject's skin quality. So I keep coming back to this whole idea that if the person's skin, if they have breakouts, or the skin is not dry, or it is dry and not moisturized properly, it's going to be really difficult for you to fix these things in post. And the whole idea behind what I do with my work is to try to get the best quality image so that when I get to post, there's not going to be so much to do. And part of the ways, or one of the ways that I'm able to do that, is by choosing the right lens for the situation. So you might be asking again, what lens? Like, what is the right lens to use? Generally speaking, if I'm taking a close-up portrait, I'm using something like an 85mm lens, something to where it's going to be able to give me the compression that I want. It's sharp, but it's not unforgivingly sharp. And so the 85 is kind of for years, has been my go-to lens to use. And the main reason is because of the fact that it's high quality, good sharpness, but not exceedingly sharp to where when I get to post-production, I see more than what I actually want to deal with. So an 85 is kind of like a good, if you're looking for a lens to do these close-up type of shots and you want to get good skin, 85 is very forgiving. It's a fantastic focal length. Now, if you want to, let's say you have a scenario where the makeup has been applied properly, they have great skin, it's moisturized, it looks healthy and clean, you want to doctor that up. Well, you remember tip number 2 was to use the right light shaper, so maybe you might use an umbrella or a beauty dish. But when you're going to your lenses, you might want to use something like a macro. For example, I use the Sony 90mm 2.8 macro. It is, I call it Excalibur, like it is the sharpest lens that I own. And that particular lens, anytime that I go to photograph beauty, and let's say I want to get the skin texture and I want to see a lot of the detail, I want that high definition quality to my shot, then in that scenario, I'm reaching for my 90 macro because it's going to be super sharp and it's going to give a quality to the image that there's no amount of post-processing that's going to be able to give me what that lens gives me. It has to be captured in the raw file for me to be able to extract it out. So using that 90 macro is something that's kind of a secret weapon for me. I don't use it all the time, but you know, just like if you were a handyman or handywoman, you know, you wouldn't expect for somebody to come to your house if you hired a handyman and they show up with one screwdriver or, you know, one wrench. You know, if they're going to do a job, you're going to want to see them with a toolbox of equipment so that whatever the scenario presents, they're able to overcome that. And when it comes to photographing people and getting good skin quality in the photos, nothing is different. 85 if the person is, you know, moderately good skin, if the makeup was done moderately well, and 85 is going to be a lot more forgiving. If they have great makeup applied, you're using the right light shaper, and you want to get great skin texture, pull out something like a 90 macro, or if you're shooting a different system, pull out a macro lens that's on the longer end of the focal range, because they do have like 40 and 50 millimeter macros. I'm not going to say don't mess with those. You might get a good look out of those too, but I tend to stay on the longer side. So the 90s, the 100s, the 105 macros, these are going to make for a really, really great photograph. So again, tip number 3, choose the right lens based on your subject's skin. Tip number 4 is one that I'll probably end up doing a completely separate video on, because outside of how I retouch, this is probably the second most asked question that I get all the time. But tip number 4 is that settings really, really matter, and you have to make sure that you're choosing the right settings to give you the right base image for you to start working on. So what does that mean? You're gonna know, if you see and follow my work on Facebook, or if you see my work on Instagram, you're gonna notice that my settings for studio work are always in a certain ballpark. You'll see apertures ranging from f8 f11, f13, some scenarios f16, and without question, without fail, somebody will say, well, why did you choose this particular aperture? Why did you shoot it at f8? Why did you shoot it at f11 or f13? And the reason is that I choose these higher apertures because more of the face and more of the skin is in focus and detailed and sharp. So what a lot of photographers, especially newer photographers, what they tend to do is they get a lens like an 85-1.8 or a 50-1.8 or a 50-1.4, and they automatically say, well, if I bought a 50-1.4, I want to shoot at f1.4. Well, that's great. You could totally do that, and it does give you a really interesting look. However, when it comes to photographing skin, you want to see texture, you want to see detail, right? We extracted the detail with the light shaping tools that we used. We enhanced the texture and everything that was there by the makeup that was applied. We chose a lens that gave us the amount of sharpness and clarity that we needed. And so now at this point, all of that could basically be thrown in the garbage if you choose the wrong settings. If you shoot wide open, naturally you're gonna blur the skin. You're gonna blur a lot of the image. And so if you're working with somebody that doesn't have great skin, maybe you might wanna shoot wide open. That might save you quite a bit of time in post-production if you shoot it in f1.8 or even an f2.0. You're gonna get this natural blur as opposed to doing what I see a lot of photographers do, especially the newer ones, where they'll use Gaussian blur on the skin and it doesn't look good. It makes people look like mannequins, it makes them look like cartoon characters. You don't wanna do that. The whole idea is all about capturing texture, maintaining that texture, and settings are the most important way to be able to do that. So if you want to photograph skin, start at f8 and kind of work your way up. You might notice that at the higher f-stops, you'll start to get more of the face in focus. You'll get more of it detailed. So for example, at f13, you'll get the tip of the nose in focus and you'll see a lot of texture and detail on the tip of the nose, and it carries all the way back maybe to like halfway through the ear. So you'll see a lot of texture that when you go into post-production, it's already there, like it's in the raw file. You don't have to go and do some kind of crazy acrobatics to try to create this texture. It's already inherent in the file. So your settings, you want to capture good skin, f8 and up, and you'll see that your photos are going to get infinitely better. Tip number 5 is kind of a funny one, but it is exceedingly true. You can't polish turds. I don't know how else to put this to you guys, but you cannot polish turds. There's only so much that you could do in retouching. So if you took a photograph that, let's say, of all these tips that I've been giving you, let's say you didn't use the right light shaping tool, you used the wrong lens, the makeup was applied really badly. Let's say maybe the model doesn't have, or your subject doesn't have great skin texture. Maybe they've had childhood acne or something. And then you take a photograph of them. Well, there's only so much that you can do in retouching. If you messed up the lighting, if you use the wrong lens, and you try to go into post-production, I say this, you know, jokingly, but kind of serious at the same time, that you can't polish a turd. You can't take a bad photograph. You know, you can't have a bad input and get a good output, if that makes sense. The photo has to be lit properly. You have to use the right everything, like every step of the way has to be on point. And when you get to post-production, you're gonna realize that, what I realized, there's not very much that has to happen to an image in post-production for retouching if you got all of these other things taken care of. The problem that I noticed with a lot of photographers, and I do a lot of critiques, I've judged at big conferences and competitions, and the thing that I see most common with newer photographers and even some that have been doing it for a while is that I'll see their raw file and they say, okay, so here's my photograph, here's where I'm starting from. And then they try to like do everything in post. So like it was super overexposed, but we'll fix that in post. The quality of the light was really bad, so they'll dodge and burn and they'll fix it in post. You know, it's just like all these different things. You just had this bad photo to start with, and then you think that, well, if I use frequency separation, I could fix this, or if I use dodge and burn, I could fix this image. The truth of the matter is, if you started out with a bad photo and you try to fix it in post, it's not gonna work. Now, when I say it's not gonna work, sure, you might be able to go ahead and retouch this photo and make it look semi-okay. But if you've ever posted an image on social media or you share it with a friend and they look at it and they say, oh wow, this looks over retouched. Anytime that I've ever heard someone comment on a photo and they say that it's over retouched, 9 times out of 10, the reason why that is that the photo to start off with was not a properly done photo. You know, it wasn't lit properly, the exposure was off, the lens choice was off. And then what somebody thought they could do is that they could fix it in post. Just like when people mess up the exposure, they mess up the white balance when they take a photo. And what do we do when we get to Lightroom? We turn it black and white, right? Because everything, oh, this photo looks really bad in color, but then you make it black and white and oh, everything is great again, right? And yeah, I've done it too, you know. But the reality of this situation is that you have to make sure that you're taking the photo with these other tips in mind, and I promise you, if you're doing this and you practice, and you do this often enough, you're gonna start to notice that it is so much easier for you to work on these images in post. Now, with that being said, I'm sure you're probably wondering, well, Miguel, how do you retouch the skin? You probably still have that original question in your mind, and I'm hoping that by giving you these tips that you understand that even if you understand the tips and the techniques and the methods for skin retouching, if you have a bad photo to start off with, you're wasting your time. You're gonna spend an hour, 2 hours retouching a photo that started as a turd and it ended as a turd because it just wasn't a good photo to work on. So make sure that you're taking photos that are worth your time to do the retouching, and you're gonna notice you're gonna get a better end product. You're gonna get a better photograph. Now, if you wanna learn the techniques and the methods of retouching, there are tons of videos out there. There's videos on YouTube. I have my own tutorial video, which I will link in the description. It's called Dramatic Portraiture 101. I show you 4 different images, 4 different photo shoots, and how I retouch each image using a variety of different programs. So if you wanna see specifically how I work with my images, then definitely check that out in the link below. RGG also has a tutorial that was made by Pratik that he talks about his beauty and portrait retouching. It is a fantastic video. Honestly, a majority of the things that I learned over the last few years with retouching, after I watched this video, it's like it's there. He shares it and he shows you on multiple images. He talks you through the hows and the whys. I'll link that in the description as well because I found it very useful. Even today, as somebody who considers themselves a kind of veteran retoucher, there were still things that I watched in that tutorial that I learned. So if you want to learn the nuts and bolts of like how to retouch, I would invite you guys to check out those links in the description. But trust me when I tell you, if you start applying these techniques to bad photographs, it's not gonna take you very far. I want you to get to the point to where you're taking great images that you're really happy with, and once you get into post-production, you're gonna notice that it flies right by because you have a great starting image to work with. So with that being said, I hope you guys found this conversation helpful. If you did, click that thumbs up button. Let me know in the comments section below if you have any questions in regards to any of the stuff that I talked about in this video. Leave it in the comments section for this video. I tend to reply back to those, and then I also get ideas for future videos based on your comments. So keep them constructive as well, because again, it takes a lot of time for me to kind of produce these videos and a lot of resources to produce these videos, and I just want to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. So let me know in the comment section below. Again, thank you guys for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.